On this Friday night, Israel strikes back. The attack on Iran, not the fierce response the U.S. and others had feared. Our calls for restraint being heeded.
We're committed to Israel's security. We're also committed to de-escalating.
Honoring a Canadian aid worker who died while helping to feed Gazans.
He gave his life. He left his family. He left his country.
The funeral for Jacob Flickinger, killed by an Israeli airstrike. An Ontario First Nation seeks accountability after dozens of people became sick.
Will you shut the plant down?
All options are on the table.
The crackdown on a chemical plant, will it finally lead to change? And pen pals with paintbrushes. Handwritten letters from one of Canada's most acclaimed folk artists go up for auction.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. There is an uneasy calm after Israel made good on its vow to retaliate against Iran. The pre-dawn attack, which Israel has not officially claimed responsibility for, appeared to be narrow in scope compared to Iran's much bigger missile and drone attack against Israel last weekend. Video from inside Iran, which Global News has not verified, shows orange flashes in the sky, what appear to be bursts of anti-aircraft fire. It's believed the target was in Isfahan province, home to Iran's third largest city, famed for its palaces, mosques and minarets, and also a center of military industry. Both drone and ballistic missile production and Iran's largest nuclear research complex. And north of the city, the Natanz nuclear facility, the most important center for Iran's nuclear enrichment program. The International Atomic Energy Agency was quick to say there is no damage to Iran's nuclear sites and warned nuclear facilities should never be a target in military conflicts. Reaction in Israel, Iran, and the United States has been muted, and there are tentative hopes this strike was limited enough to avoid Iran and Israel spiraling into uncontrolled violence. Our Europe Bureau Chief Crystal Goomansingh begins our coverage from Jerusalem tonight.
Donna, here in Israel, we don't know the full extent of the strike in Iran. We also don't know if there's more to come. Right now, all sides are downplaying what happened. It was nothing, says this man, who appears either to be on patrol at the nuclear facility or the nearby military base. With tight regulations on which images can be made public, it's nearly impossible to get a clear picture of the scope of the Friday morning attack, as Iranian state TV only showed serene sights. Global News has not verified this video, but it appears to show the night sky only periodically illuminated, and some of those flashes could be from air defense systems. It's a stark contrast to the swarm of drones and missiles Iran fired towards Israel last week.
Israel confined itself to something which is very, very limited and well thought of. I can say that, in my opinion, it was definitely in kind of an agreement with the United States.
After facing harsh and persistent criticism for the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, Israel is again enjoying close relations with many of its allies. America, along with some European and Arab nations, helped Israel protect itself against Iran's attacks, which it argued were justified after one of its consular buildings in Syria was struck April 1st. Israel never took responsibility for that strike and hasn't taken responsibility for the one in Isfahan either.
We think the situation in the Middle East is complicated, but Israel will always win, and everybody needs to know that.
I'm afraid what will happen now.
In Tehran, another large, loud rally with calls for the end of Israel. The Zionist regime should know that if it makes a mistake this time, it will be punished harder and more severely, says this Iranian army commander. While Israeli military officials are not commenting, far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir did take to social media. He posted one word in Hebrew. When translated in English, it reads, weak. People here in Israel and right around the world are now waiting to see what comes next, especially given Monday is Passover, a major Jewish holiday. Donna?
Crystal Goomansingh in Jerusalem, thanks. This was not a full-scale attack on Iran, which is what Israel's allies had feared it might launch and which they had warned against. Israel fended off Iran's attack last week, and President Biden had urged Israel's prime minister to take the win. Today, there were no angry statements and no vows of further retaliation, and that, observers say, is a relief. Jackson Proskow reports from Washington.
Israel's closest ally was quick to distance itself from the strike.
The United States has not been involved in any offensive operations.
After a week spent urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to retaliate against Iran, the U.S. joined a chorus of Western nations, including Canada, calling on both sides to show restraint.
And we need to move towards peace and stability in the region. We need de-escalation.
Reports suggest the White House did receive warning of Israel's plans, but neither condemned nor endorsed the Israeli action.
We do not have any comment on the reports at this time.
Indications are Israel's limited response has at least tacit approval in Washington, potentially deterring Iran without sparking the kind of conflict that would inevitably force the U.S. to rush to Israel's defense.
The U.S. has not taken a position. They didn't say this was too far or too little. They just said, you'll do what you need to do. We're not going to be joining in with you.
None of it has changed American support for Israel, with the Biden administration said to be weighing more than $1 billion in new weapons sales to a nation it has repeatedly asked to show restraint. Any new weapons sales would be on top of the $26 billion in aid the U.S. is already preparing to approve for Israel. Friday, the foreign aid package took a big step forward in Congress with bipartisan support. It also includes $61 billion for Ukraine. And a final vote to approve the deal for both countries could come as early as this weekend. Donna?
Okay, Jackson in Washington, thanks. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told NATO members today they must decide whether Ukraine really is an ally. And he said the way to show it is by accelerating the supply of weapons. Zelensky pleaded with NATO for more help today, describing levels of foreign aid as very limited. He said Ukraine's skies must become safe again and that NATO must decide whether life is indeed equally valuable everywhere. A Russian attack on the Dnipro region in Ukraine has killed at least 8 people. Those airstrikes severely damaged a residential building and critical infrastructure, including a major train station. Ukraine says it later downed the Russian warplane that launched that air assault. 3 men have been detained in Poland on suspicion of attacking a close ally of Alexei Navalny. Leonid Volkov was the chief of staff for Navalny, who died in a Russian prison. Volkov was attacked with a hammer in March outside his home in Lithuania, where he lives in exile. Poland says the attack was ordered by a Belarusian working for the Russians. 2 Polish citizens known to police are accused of carrying out the attack. Family and friends of Jacob Flickinger, the Canadian aid worker killed by an Israeli airstrike in Gaza, gathered today for his funeral. Dozens joined Flickinger's family in a procession to the church south of Quebec City, where the 33-year-old was baptized as a child. Veterans who served alongside him in the Canadian military were there and described him as one of the strongest people they've ever met.
He was like a hero for us because he went there and, fought for his country in Afghanistan. Now he was doing that to help people, because they needed food and yeah, that happened. So we're pretty shocked today, yeah.
Flickinger was one of 7 employees of the World Central Kitchen who were helping to feed the hungry in Gaza when they were killed by an Israeli airstrike. He was a dual citizen, and a second ceremony will be held for him in Washington, D.C. next week. The Ontario government is cracking down on a chemical plant after dozens of people in a First Nation became sick this week. Extremely high levels of the cancer-causing chemical benzene were detected in Aamjiwnaang First Nation, southwest of Sarnia. That community is surrounded by petrochemical plants within a 25-kilometer radius. People there have been exposed to high levels of dangerous pollutants for years. Now, in response to growing public concern over the spike in benzene readings, the province says it is taking action. But as our chief investigative correspondent Carolyn Jarvis reports, people who live there have little hope it will amount to change.
After benzene readings in Aamjiwnaang First Nation reached alarming levels this week, what community members became furious about is that no one sounded the alarm, notifying them about the potential danger.
People knew about readings, you know, why wasn't somebody informed?
We need to know that they've got these monitoring systems in place and that they're actually using them.
Now, the Ontario government says it's going to change that. Global News obtained a provincial order the Ministry of the Environment issued late Thursday to the chemical plant it says is the primary source of those benzene levels, INEOS Styrolution. The order gives the company 1 week to provide a written plan to reduce the benzene levels, 2 weeks to have a procedure in place to notify the public when emissions exceed a new health benchmark, like the readings seen this week, and a month to complete an investigation into the source of the apparent leak. The order also indicates INEOS is already investigating the cause of the emissions. The company previously told Global News it meets all regulated standards.
It's not as if this, we have to go find the solutions. They're cost effective and they're readily available.
Aamjiwnaang First Nation has demanded the plant be shut down until the company can show the air is safe to breathe. But when we asked the minister Friday,
will you shut the plant down?
All options are on the table. So as of last night, we have promptly issued a new order that the company INEOS has to follow.
This will be now the 4th provincial order you have issued to this same company over the last 5 years, all with respect to reducing benzene emissions, and yet the levels keep going up. So why should they believe that this new latest provincial order will be any different?
Right, we made it really clear as to what the next steps need to be done, and we'll continue to ensure that INEOS is responsible for their pollution, their emission, and we will do whatever it takes to hold them to account.
The ministry has also indicated it's looking at updating a regulation which would allow it to issue penalties of up to $100,000 for companies that exceed new, lower health benchmarks. Despite years of high benzene readings at INEOS's fence line, the plant has never been fined by the government for its emissions.
No, there's no prosecution. The ministry lacks the capability of enforcement.
Just last month, Aamjiwnaang's chief testified before a Senate committee debating a new bill to address environmental racism.
We want to feel confident that the air that we are breathing isn't slowly killing us, and that our children will not get sick and die before us.
He has now hinted Aamjiwnaang may take legal action to protect the community. Carolyn Jarvis, Global News, Toronto.
You can find out more about the chemical leaks and spills around Sarnia, Ontario on our website. Carolyn Jarvis investigates in a Global News special presentation called Canada's Toxic Secret. There was quite a moment outside the courthouse in New York City today where former U.S. President Donald Trump's trial is taking place, and a warning: what happened is disturbing. A man is in critical condition after setting himself on fire. Police say the man from Florida threw what they describe as conspiracy-type pamphlets into the air and then doused himself with an accelerant and lit himself on fire. His motive is unknown. Inside the courthouse, jury selection finished today. All 12 jurors and 6 alternates have been picked. Opening statements are expected Monday. The case centers around hush money paid to adult film star Stormy Daniels in an alleged scheme to cover up negative stories about Trump before the 2016 presidential election. Alberta braces for an historic drought. Coming up, how farmers will have to work around strict new rules on water usage.
You left your typewriter at my...
And she's back with more. Pop music titan Taylor Swift drops her latest album.
Canadians want to be informed. That's why more Canadians than ever are turning to Global News at globalnews.ca, one of the most visited news sites in Canada, on YouTube, where Global News is the #1 news source in the country, with the Global TV app, or streaming Global News 24/7 on a smart TV. For the most extensive news coverage available on all platforms, Canada's trusted source for news, Global News.
Nearly 1 billion people have begun voting in what will be a long process in India's election. Voters began lining up before dawn. About 970 million people, or about 12% of the world's population, are eligible to cast a ballot. It's such a huge operation that voting is staggered and will run until June 1st. This election is seen as a referendum on Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He's trying to secure a 3rd straight term. He is popular, but faces criticism for his hardline Hindu nationalism, which has aggravated religious tensions in India. The UN has said global drought resilience is not a matter of choice, but a necessity, and there are already water shortages in several parts of the world. In Colombia, the entire country has been hit by drought. In the capital, Bogota, couples have been told to shower together to conserve water. In North America's biggest city, Mexico City, which relies on underground aquifers, water shortages are common. The city has resorted to trucking in water to supply residents. Here in Canada, there are warnings of what's to come, too. A rapidly heating planet means warmer winters and smaller snowpacks, which creates the prospect of serious and prolonged droughts. This is the picture in Canada right now. The gray is extreme drought. The area is surrounded by large sections of red, severe drought, and orange, moderate drought. Parts of Western Canada are in the danger zone, including much of Alberta. Stakeholders there have signed a series of historic agreements about how water will be shared as farms, municipalities, and industry are bracing for what could be the worst drought season in 23 years. As Heather Yurix-West explains, there will be some significant sacrifices needed.
As Stephen Vandervalk works on getting his last year's crop to market, his mind is on the growing season ahead.
To start the year, we have to make plans.
Like many producers in semi-arid southern Alberta, Vandervalk depends on irrigation to water his crops. But this year, that water will be in short supply.
When it comes to water this year, we must all do with less.
Facing what could be the worst year of drought in more than 20 years, water users across southern Alberta have negotiated an historic deal on how to share a potentially scarce supply. While industry won't be required to make any cuts, municipalities, including Calgary, will reduce their use by 5 to 10%, while irrigating farmers, which hold the legal right to most of southern Alberta's water, will see their allocation cut in half.
Farmers are now having to plan for a season knowing they'll receive just a fraction of the water they usually require. That's leading to some difficult decisions. Some fields may not see any seed this year at all.
It's going to be sort of new. Like it's very rare to be on allocation. And so I don't know exactly, to be totally honest, I don't know exactly how we're going to manage it quite yet.
But what's new this year could soon become the norm, with climate models for the region predicting a shorter snow season, the complete loss of mountain glaciers, and a new reliance on what could be infrequent rainfall.
That's a very different hydrological system than we have now. And we have to prepare for that. It implies much greater variability.
Making water an increasingly precious commodity right across the prairies. Heather Yurix-West, Global News, near Fort Macleod, Alberta.
Surf's up ahead. Could this be the world's biggest wave ever ridden? This is Nazaré, Portugal, where some of the biggest waves on the planet are produced. And video released today shows what could be a record setter. German surfer Sebastian Studner dropped into this wave earlier this season. The height of it was calculated using drone technology, which measured it at 28.57 meters. If officially ratified, that makes it the biggest wave ever surfed. Well, 2 hours after Taylor Swift dropped her highly anticipated new album, she announced a big surprise. It's a double album.
I hate it here, so I will go to secret gardens in my mind.
The Tortured Poets Department features 31 songs on 2 albums, most of them about heartbreak. Swift posted on Instagram that she had written so much tortured poetry in the past 2 years, she wanted to share it. Special connection next, the beauty of handwritten pen pal letters between 2 Canadian artists. There was a time in the pre-digital age when pen pals were a thing, and getting a letter from someone far away who you'd never met was the biggest thrill. Well, now 6 letters from the 1960s between Canadian pen pals have sold at auction for thousands of dollars. They were sent to an artist in Ontario by an artist in Nova Scotia named Maud Lewis. Heidi Petrachuk has the story of a beautiful long-distance connection.
At this Ontario auction house, items constantly come and go.
Oh, this is marvelous.
And these letters mean the world to Sheila Kinnear. Written to her father, John Kinnear, in the 1960s by Maud Lewis, the Nova Scotia folk artist who lived and died in poverty. Her works now sell for tens of thousands of dollars.
Dear Mr. Kinnear, Received your letters. Yes, I like the paint very much.
John Kinnear was a Second World War veteran who started painting full-time after retirement and heard about the diminutive maritime artist who used the very walls of her home as her canvas, often unable to afford supplies.
He always had said, it's never too late to help someone. You might be the only one that does.
So John started sending Lewis what she needed, and the correspondence began.
When you read them, it touches your heart. It really does. It's like looking at one of her paintings.
Maud Lewis died in 1970 at age 67. John showed the letters to his daughter just before he died in 2003 at 81.
They need to be in the hand of someone who's going to appreciate them, collect them, and revere them for Canadian art history.
Her paintings, of course, were her life, but in this case, the letters give us a glimpse into her life that maybe the painting couldn't do.
$6,500 for this exciting package. Sold right there.
And so last week, the letters sold to a collector for $8,000.
She's got a global awareness now. Her prices are going up. People are collecting her. I only wished it could have happened while she was still alive. I would have liked to have seen that. This one, the January...
After holding the letters to her father for the last time, Sheila knows the story of the unique bond between two artists is one she will always have. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
That is Global National for this Friday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Air Canada is Bowen Island, BC. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. And thanks for watching. Para Nasser is at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I will see you again next week. Bye-bye.